I am Norma Williams, and I have been a resident in this neighborhood for over 40 years. I originally came from Jamaica, and I have lived in this particular neighborhood with my husband and 3 daughters for that time period. I am an educator, and I retired from the New York City Board of Education after having taught for 33 years here in New York City in middle school, and I taught prior to that in Jamaica for 4 years. I am an ordained minister, a reverend, and I'm very involved in my church where I do ministry. I am, as I said, an educator, not just in the secular sense, but also in the spiritual sense, in that I have taught Sunday school, I have been superintendent of Sunday school, I do all the things that a minister does. I marry, I bury, unfortunately, and so that has been my that's what I do. Well, it wasn't really necessarily my choice. It was, you come to this country and this is where your relatives were. My husband was here ahead of me, and this is where he lived in this neighborhood. So it wasn't, say, my choice. It was where you happened to come. And so, because this was the neighborhood to which I came, I stayed. I like it. I've not really lived in any other neighborhood, so I can't even begin to say, oh, in comparison to living in the Bronx or in comparison to living in Canarsie, it has always been Flatbush. If I were to talk about Flatbush in the past, I would talk about big stores that were even here in Flatbush. We had Macy's in Flatbush, and then that has been replaced. Then it became a Staples, now it's a Burlington. We had stores like Loman. Well, Sears is gone, unfortunately, because I think Sears was such a store that catered to, I would say, to us minorities, because that was a store that you could go to, you could get all your electrical appliances, you could get the credit. Now Sears is gone. A change also in supermarket chains. Right next to us we had a Walmart. Down the street where Dwayne Reed is now used to be an A&P store. So we have also seen that change in terms of supermarkets that has taken place. Many of the small mom and pop stores are no longer around, which I think is a disservice to the community, because and also to the people who had to leave, whether it was because of rent or what, but many mom and pop stores have closed. And you kind of got to know those people in the stores because they were part of the neighborhood fixtures. Now what we're seeing is still little stores going up. So now we have our cafes, we have our the bodegas. Some of the bodegas have given away to cafes, have given away to little restaurants that pop up. So we're seeing those changes. Some of the nail salons have given away to stores that seem to pop up overnight. And some of these stores that pop up, they do not stay. So you have that constant change also in stores popping up and going out. One of the things, though, that I do say that has come into our neighborhood that is very, very good is Greenlight Bookstore, because prior to that we didn't have a bookstore per se. We had our libraries, which were good. So now we have Greenlight Bookstore on Flatbush, and on Bedford we have Cups and Books, when we moved to Parkside, it was a mixed block. You know, my neighbors to my right, they were actually Jamaicans, and to my left, we had Caucasian family, and it was a mixture of different groups. Further down the block, we have people from Yemen, a great Yemenite group, and you know, so this block has really been a block in which we have had people from different ethnic groups living together. One of the biggest changes that we see in terms of ethnicity would occur in the apartment buildings, because in the apartment buildings we have seen a great influx of white people, which was not the case when we moved here. Basically, those apartment buildings were occupied by people of black and brown people. We were either African Americans or West Indians who had come here, Puerto Ricans, Yemenites, or might have been other Arabs. I can't just say Yemenites because some might have been from other Arab countries. But basically, those were the people that we saw in the apartment buildings. You know, a large Hispanic population. They would have their celebrations going up the street. You know, they celebrate not just We Three Kings Days, but they have Las Pasadas, and they would celebrate that, and you would see them with, you know, going up the street carrying their figures of Mary and Joseph, and just celebrating who they were. So, and then of course when Labor Day comes around, it's a celebration of Caribbean heritage, so you'd also have that. But that's what we had initially. So now the biggest change, I would say, is more white people coming into the apartment buildings, because the homes haven't really changed ownership that much. But what we're seeing now in this neighborhood, Clarkson Avenue, one block over, Flatbush Avenue, Nostrand Avenue, 2 blocks up, even Parkside going a little bit further up towards Nostrand, you're seeing Linden. Oh my Lord, we're seeing all of these big buildings going up. They have replaced homes. A great deal. Many homes have been replaced by, I guess, people sold their homes, and the landlords, in buying them, tore down the homes and have put up these high-rise buildings. And that's one of the sad things, I think, that has occurred in this neighborhood, is that we have lost a sense of what it looked like. You know, no longer are you walking down on Bedford Avenue and seeing this. There were 2 beautiful homes at the corner of Bedford and Lenox on the right. They got torn down. You know, my mother-in-law used to go, she knew the people who lived there, and they had nice plants, and she would go and just sit with them because they worked in the same hotel. After the lady died, I guess they sold the houses, and now we have this big building, massive. Probably resilient in that living in Flatbush requires, it's a community, but it requires a great deal of resiliency. One has to be prepared to withstand the changes. One has to be prepared to forge through to become who you want to be, because sometimes there's so many distractions. So even if, as we think of young people, they have to have that sense of resiliency that they can make it. They might look around and they might see, things that are happening. They might hear of shootings. They could become easily discouraged. But if they have that sense of resiliency, which I think is something that is tied with community, in that resiliency is something I think that is formed in homes. So parents are going to build within their children this sense that you can make it, you can do it. My family is here, that's a connection. My church is here, that's a connection. Because my church is here, I have friends who are here. The culture connects me to the neighborhood, in that despite the changes, and some of these changes are very subtle, that are taking place, you might wake up one day and you say, well, what happened to this with which I was very familiar? And you realize it's gone. But despite those changes, there's still a sense of the cultural aspects. So I can still go to the park and I can still hear the drummers beating on their drums. I can still go to the park, especially during the summer, and I can hear the sounds of the Caribbean. I'm hoping that we'll have a revival of the what we call the Labor Day Parade. It's such a grounding for many people who have come from the Caribbean, just the fact that once a year you get to parade who you are. I think that's something that has kept us in the fact that this is, I still like to think of this as a neighborhood that is pretty West Indian, pretty Caribbean, despite the changes that have taken place. So that keeps me grounded here. Or that's my affinity. If I were to put it in quotation marks, whether you are from the Caribbean or you consider yourself Hispanic, and we do have that within this community. So I guess when you're coming in from other countries, especially from the Caribbean islands, you come here and you would have that sense of, oh, I see people who look like me, I hear my language being spoken, and so it's easier for you to just become a part of the community. And I think that's what it is for us. Well, in church I always feel like I'm in community. In school I feel like I'm in community. When we have our block parties, I feel I'm in community. When I can walk down the street and talk with my neighbor just at their gate, I feel like I'm in community. I feel like I'm in community when, it's so strange, but sometimes young people don't know your name and they might use a term like mommy. They're not their mothers, but they see you enough, and so they might, you might say hi to them, and that's how they respond. And to me, that's community. I really think that if more people could be loved, if more people encounter love, caring, the community would be so much better. Because you see, love says, love says, I can see you. I don't necessarily have to know you, but I can see you as a person. And when I begin to see you as a person, created in God's image, then I can love you. And if I love you, then I'm not going to harm you. And I think if more people would just begin to love, my God, the changes that would come about.